thinks about making money, but it would also be great if I could have a social impact or an environmental impact. So I actually kind of want to make the world a better place, but I also want to make money.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kerri Damon. I'm the Director of Entrepreneurship Education here at Mars, and welcome to different types of entrepreneurship. I would like to introduce our two speakers today, and what I like about this session is that Mars works with technology entrepreneurs, but also has a very strong social innovation practice. So they're going to talk to you about different types of entrepreneurship, and it's really nice to have the dual speaker format and to present the options so that you can see what really resonates with you and what you want to do going forward on your journey. They are longtime supporters of the program. Allyson Hewitt has given this lecture and others for a number of years, and Kerri Golden was very dedicated to the financial planning lecture for many years and asked for a refresh, so we've jumped her into this one. So Allyson Hewitt is the Director of Social Entrepreneurship here at Mars. She leads our social innovation practice, so her team works on a broad range of innovations, everything from not-for-profits interested in revenue generation to entrepreneurs committed to social transformation. She brings considerable expertise from the public sector, including the introduction of 211 and several award-winning innovations. She comes to Mars from Sick Kids, where as Executive Director of Sick Kids Canada, she was an advocate for child safety. Prior to that, she was the Executive Director of Community Information Toronto, an agency that matches people with services. For this work, she was awarded the HRDC-sponsored Head of the Public Service Awards and several other awards as well. Kerri Golden has worked with Mars in a number of roles. Most recently, she is the General Partner of the Jolt Fund. She has worked for over 25 years as an executive entrepreneur and investor. As she's helped raise over $1 billion in equity and debt and has actively negotiated a number of merger and acquisition transactions. She's currently working as an independent consultant and a volunteer advisor at Mars with an interest in the ICT and social innovation sectors. As I mentioned, she's the general partner at the Jolt Fund, which you might mention a little bit about the Jolt Fund. It's the in the Mars Commons, the new accelerator that they launched in the last year. She works on the board of directors at Creative D, as an advisor at Horizon Studios, and is a member of OCS's Exempt Market Advisory Committee. She previously held executive positions with venture-backed companies Seawell Networks and InfoBright. And with that, I welcome Allyson and Kerri.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to be using a handheld mic because I have a bit of a cold, and if my voice gives out, it's going to be the Kerri Golden show with Allyson just sitting here with her sore throat. So tonight we want to talk about your motivation. Why do you want to be an entrepreneur? So who's here because they want to make money? Okay. Who thinks about making money, but it would also be great if I could have a social impact or an environmental impact? So I actually kind of want to make the world a better place, but I also want to make money. Okay, great. How many people don't care at all about making money? They just want to make the world a better place. Okay, yay, two of us, yay. We're going to have a drink afterwards. But it's actually really important to understand what your motivation is. And actually, you used to have to make a choice. You used to have to work for a charity, not make that much money, but you could actually feel better about yourself at the end of the day. Or you had to work at a for-profit, you were going to profit maximize, and maybe you would give money back later in life. But the world doesn't work that way anymore. And as this audience here shows, you can actually make money and make a difference. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So if you do that, we should flip, Kerri.
Actually, and I think first we're going to actually show you an entrepreneur who's going to talk about why he did this. He's Ray Reddy, a Mars client who worked at Push Life. And to set the context, he has got on and had his company acquired by Google, and he's got some interesting words for you guys.
Oh, great.
I never see an exit as success criteria. What drives me is always building something. I'm a small company sort of guy, whether it was my own or was something small, you know, with the founding team. I think that was sort of what I was looking for.
Robin and I were working together at Ventures West. I was an entrepreneur in residence there, Robin was a partner. And we were looking at the model and believing that there was a better way to do venture in Canada. So we both left Ventures West and we formed BaseCamp Labs. And this was BaseCamp Labs was a self-funded entity. And we got involved with Push Life and Chango, and the rest is sort of history.
We met at the early stages. It was early in Push Life and it was early days in the BaseCamp partners. And we just respected each other as a group of guys that could help build something.
This is really about finding founders. You think you're going to help in the early stages be successful, and then you're comfortable with all the money you've given him to back away and let him, drive the bus and take it forward.
We could probably both say it at the exact same time. Ray.
Ray is pretty exceptional. He had great vision from early days. It hasn't wavered much at all. And as we meet people, new entrepreneurs, new founders, even with great ideas, Ray really set a high bar.
One of the things that I'd mapped through the mid-2000s was just smartphone penetration in developed countries, North America and Europe. The reality of today is that global handset distribution is weighted towards 80% feature phones and 20% smartphones. And so there's sort of a greenfield opportunity right now with emerging countries that just don't have the kind of smartphone penetration we have here. So that's an opportunity that I really keyed in on.
In the early days, the whole company was hinged on a two-way sync functionality. And we had a phone call with one of the carriers early on, and we pitched it as this two-way sync product, and it was better than anything out there, and it would do this and that, and it just was a complete flop. And went back to the drawing board and came back with, this is an iTunes style store for mobile, and that you enable the carrier to finally get into the game of selling content the way iTunes is doing that with their iPhone on your network. And when they got that, we went into that pitch and it was immediate. It flipped the thinking.
We truly leveraged the capabilities and the connectivity on a phone to immediately pull down song lyrics, biographies, artist pictures, news, concert listings, and really make the platform stand out. Some mistakes are really costly to fix in the long run. So hiring is done through references and people we know. There's always the option of using headhunters, and you do get good people through them, they're just expensive. Most people coming to us are looking for autonomy, control, and the ability to make a difference. And usually those are the kinds of people we want to hire anyway. Our first employee definitely had the right skills, but there's some signs at an interview that he may not really necessarily be the kind of guy that would fit into a company like this. Ignored that intuition and just kind of said, look, the skills look right on paper, so it should be fine. And that was a disaster. We had to let this person go. And I think I'm starting to learn more that intuition is more important than I think people give it credit.
I don't think we went at it as, how do you do this as an investor? I think we went at it more as, how do we build companies again the right way? And that's where Push Life came in. It really was very influential and helped us kind of define the way we got involved very actively in companies.
I don't look at them as my venture investors. I look at them as just guys on a team helping to build something.
We sat in a meeting one day and Ray sort of looked over and said, here are the co-founders for me, Duncan and Robin. That's exactly what we want to feel like every time in the companies we get involved in.
In the next 18 months or so, as we really start moving into emerging countries and geographies that have almost no other electronics, we can allow mobile entertainment to be brought in a really cost-effective manner. It's not saving the world or curing cancer, but it's one of the ways that I think we can address emerging markets and deliver high value at a very low cost.
Great, thanks, Kerri. So everybody's got their motivations for doing this, but at the end of the day, to create something and to make an impact is kind of wonderful. So we talked a little bit about motivation. Kerri, did you want to add anything about motivation?
No, I think we're good.
Great. So the second thing is, what kind of resources do you need? So do you need an office? Can you work out of your basement? What about a shared space? There's a whole movement now to these shared workspaces. There's quite a lot of them in Toronto. And we, in fact, have one right here. And I'm going to ask Kerri to talk about that.
So yes, we have on the second floor here in the Heritage Building something called the Mars Commons, which is a shared workspace that you can rent space, whether you're here every day or, you have someone that you want to be in the downtown area that has an office they want to pop into from time to time. And, it's about making space available at a decent price for entrepreneurs, but it's also about that environment of collaboration and in some ways that healthy competition that keeps you working towards your milestones. And we'll talk about Jolt, the accelerator program within that a little bit later when we talk about financing.
Great. So the other thing is, what is so special about you and your product? What is unique, right? Has someone else done it before? That's where you want to start, because probably somebody has. If you've got this idea, it's likely that someone else has done it or done a variation on it. So you need to start by thinking about that. You need to do some market intelligence. Who else has tried something similar? Or who has tried something exactly the same, and why didn't it work? And so what can you learn from that? And oftentimes when we see people, we say, you know what, this group is already doing this. You've got a slightly different twist, but you don't need to start a company. You don't need to start an organization. Work with them. So that's a really good place to start. And if they're not doing it, why aren't they doing it? Now let's talk for a second about corporate structure. Everybody traditionally thinks about for-profit, that's it. But we have a lot of people who come in and say, this is what I want to do, and I want to find out the right corporate structure to make that happen. Could be a for-profit, could be a not-for-profit, could be a charity, or it could be something like Mars, which is a bit of a hybrid of all of those. Mars is a social enterprise. So we own the building and we rent it out. You know, people can rent out office space here, or you could rent out this amazing facility for an event that you're having. And in addition to some government funding to provide programs like this, we are able to generate revenue and allow for us to think about our own sustainability going forward. So as a social enterprise, we have to make decisions every day, which says, do we rent this out to some corporation who can make a lot of money so we can be sustainable, or do we make it available for free for Entrepreneurship 101? So I hope we made the right decision and made it available to you guys. But those are the kind of challenges that you have to think about. And Mars actually recently released a white paper on choosing your corporate structure to help you think about what is the goal that you want to achieve and what's the right corporate structure to get there. So we draw a little bit of a spectrum for you. Old world, grant, I do really good work, I'm a charity, give me money, right? So think about the Red Cross, who does amazing work, and particularly in times of disaster and relief, you will hear them making an appeal, and hopefully you will be able to reach out and support them, but that's one model. On the other end, the traditional business, like a bank, and we use CIBC a lot because they're a sponsor, and we're good people to sponsor, just in case anybody wants to sponsor us. I'm showing the kind of promo that you get when you do that. So a bank that will make money, like that's what their job is, very clear. But then they have things like corporate social responsibility. You've probably all heard of the CIBC Run for the Cure. They've branded this run, which is this charity thing that sits right adjacent to the work they do in the bank. And our job here is to put pressure on both sides of the spectrum to get people to think about how charities can revenue generate or be more self-sustaining, to get corporations to think about what could their social impact be. And then for my particular area, we have this sweet spot in the middle where people think their social mission or environmental mission is as important as their profit motive. Some fall profit first, some fall social first, but there's that really interesting new sweet spot that's emerging globally. And Kerri's going to give us a couple of examples of groups she's working with in the middle.
Yeah, so in the middle, we have a company called Better the World that actually came into Mars as a client in Allyson's social innovation group and actually migrated over to our ICE, so our information, communication, entertainment practice, where myself and another gentleman were their lead advisors. The interesting thing about Better the World is they graduated from their MBAs and always felt very, very strongly that they wanted to have a social impact. The interesting thing about their first idea, which was to have people view ads in support of a charity and earn ad revenue that way, to be honest, wasn't really all that great an idea, resonating either on the social spectrum or on the for-profit side. And so it was interesting. They did some CSR work. They did some great things. They are behind the Indigo Give a Book to Schools campaign. And they pivoted, and so they came up with a model, and they just finished raising $2 million of financing, which is great on them, for a product called FlipGive, which takes grassroots fundraising and puts it online, a la Groupon, and gets charities to be able to offer the deal of the day to their potential people that are supporting those grassroots charities. So instead of selling the chocolate-covered almonds or the meat out of the back of a car, you can come up with a really interesting retail offer. And the really good thing about it is the retailer actually makes money right out of the gate. And so that is really, to me, a business that has its social mission very much embedded in the way they do business, but they really are profit first. Type of organization. I don't know, Allyson, if you want to talk a little bit about one that maybe flips on the other side a little bit.
So one would be Fifth Town Artisan Cheese, which, this is a woman that does organic, it's a dairy, and she's got the most amazing artisanal cheeses that you really want to check out. And she actually has been caught up in a bit of a struggle between should we be mission first or should we be profit first. And one of the big lessons there that she's happy to share with everyone is it's great when you're controlling it, but if you bring on other investors, they've got to be able to buy into the mission as much as you do, or else you get into a really nasty situation and you have to make a choice. And so one of the things that she did was incorporate as a B corporation or a benefit corporation, which is this new hybrid legal structure that right now is like a set of ISO standards that you complete that shows that you are considering both your social and your financial mission. So we're looking at a whole brand strategy around that. And then, there's other groups, like we have a picture here of a soccer club. They charge fees in order to exist. They don't necessarily think of themselves as social enterprises, but that's how they survive. My favorite examples are those that take the skills and expertise of both for-profits and not-for-profits and knock it out of the park. So if you think about the mental health campaign that Bell did with CAMH, the Let's Talk campaign where they had Clara Hughes involved in that, and the posters were all over the place, using the amazing resources that Bell had and the expertise that CAMH had to really make a difference about reducing stigma around mental health. So there's lots of combinations that you could put together and really make a difference and come out with some financial benefit as well.
And the other one, who obviously one of our more profitable companies we know out there, Google, has done a really interesting thing in creating Google.org. So their foundation has, really direct roots to some of the things they do. So some of the projects they work on for the developing world are around apps or, tracking mechanisms with Google Maps around the Amazon River. So very, very much tied to their business. But then they also will survey their employee base and see what's interesting to them. And so environment sustainability are really big issues at Google. And so they went off to try and build the first electric car built by Google engineers. And so some really interesting things can happen when you are obviously, able to take a piece of that profit and shave it off towards doing good.
Great. So we want you to write the corporate structure that works for you. So the next thing we're going to talk about is all the different kinds of organizations. So Kerri?
Yeah, so we're going to start with a consulting organization. And certainly one of the key characteristics of this kind of business is, obviously many people can participate. They can have a very diverse focus. You can have a variable size. I could be an independent consultant like myself, or I could have a very large firm like some of the examples that you'll be familiar up there with, like McKinsey or Bain, or some of the ones associated with some of the accounting firms like Deloitte. Obviously, you're there to leverage your mostly knowledge assets to provide, access to markets and to provide advice. And Allyson, maybe you want to talk a little bit about some of the specialty ones in the social innovation space.
Yeah, it's a growing field. So there's groups called Aperio or Venturdella. You might have heard of these organizations. But what's really interesting now is that you can be a single operator, but you can work virtually and engage people all around the world to help your clients. You don't have to work for a big consulting firm. Not that we don't love them, we do, because they're big supporters of Mars. But, there's opportunities for really interesting strategic alliances where you can put together a consortium to work on a project virtually. You don't need to have a big space and all of that all around it.
No, and so obviously Allyson was tipping some of those benefits and risks. Certainly there's low capital cost, minimal, to set it up. You might need some business cards, a website, a mobile phone, away you go. Obviously you have to have some sort of specialized knowledge or experience that someone's going to want to pay you for. So that obviously is need. One thing people may not think about is liability insurance, because you are giving advice. You want to really be sure that you protect yourself. But these can be very difficult businesses to build and scale, and that's why oftentimes you'll see companies become medium-sized consulting firms, and all of a sudden they've been eaten up by Bain or McKinsey or one of the others. Because to do it on a global scale, large, it is a bit more of a challenge. Our next type of business is a service business, and clearly you got to love what you're doing when you're in the service business. So you got to love your customers. You got to deliver that service absolutely top-notch every time with a smile. And so who are these types of organizations? So they could be as simple as a dog walking service. They could be a financial services institution. Salesforce.com obviously has revolutionized selling software as a service, so a product that has been turned into a service. And Allyson, you may want to talk a little bit about what they do in the not-for-profit side.
So this is really interesting. So Salesforce it really has a very strong social mission. So if you're a not-for-profit organization, and there's about 165,000 charities in this country, there's a lot of charities, but the majority of them don't have any staff. If you have less than 10 employees and you want a Salesforce license, they'll give it to you for free. And you remember that B Corporation that I talked about? Well, in the US, they're trying to set up all these different benefits that could be accrued to B corporations to try to build the brand. And they've made a deal with Salesforce that B corporations will also get 10 licenses for free. So there's some real interesting opportunities for corporations to align themselves with a brand that's doing good and making a difference as well as making money.
The other thing to keep in mind as well is we certainly see in the online and the mobile environment where there are a lot of businesses that are actually the broker service for a delivery of service. So you might find you are the dog walking website to encourage dog walkers to be able to connect with dog owners and make business and earn a commission off those. And so that's becoming a much, much more popular services model. Certainly the capital costs can be high if you're operating a service that has a lot of equipment associated with it, servers, those types of things. The other thing to keep in mind as well is you have to really hire, train, and continually motivate the team that's delivering the service. Otherwise, your reputation will falter, and that's how you make your money. So clearly a core part of the business.
So let's talk about Courier Services for a second. When we do, you might think about FedEx, right? And FedEx has a strong corporate social responsibility approach. And so Safe Kids Worldwide is their global partner, and they support them. But, they're pretty traditional. They do some great stuff, but pretty traditional. On the other side of it, you have Away Express. So Away Express is a courier service here in Toronto, and they work with people who have mental health challenges. And they deliver courier packages using the TTC. So they're out to make money, it's got a social mission, and it's got an environmental mission.
And so obviously they are, their customers are obviously interested in doing business with them because they deliver the service on time and at a reasonable cost. But also oftentimes they will be, quite happy to offer businesses to these types of organizations because it does help them on their corporate social responsibility scorecard as well, to be an active and giving part of the community.
Sorry about that, you guys. Thank you, Kerri. The other group is Good Foot Courier, who works with people with developmental delays. And again, they do amazing service. And then in the middle is Turnaround Couriers, which is a for-profit social purpose business that hires only out of shelters. So they are bike couriers, but they have never lost a package, and they're a very serious business trying to do this double bottom line, but as a for-profit.
And they have some pretty impressive customers, Turnaround Couriers. They deliver for the banks, they deliver for some of the government agencies. And so, definitely if you're interested in the social angle for your business, there are customers out there that would be, very happy to buy from you, assuming you can deliver service.
Okay, of course all these slides are mine. Well, I'm choking to death, but I'll try. Anybody know this guy? John Mighton. Yeah, great. So John is an amazing social entrepreneur, and I want to talk about him for a second because he's not interested just in making money, but he's interested in transforming the society that we have to create a more numerate society. So this is a scene from the movie Good Will Hunting. Does anybody remember that movie? So John was the math consultant on Good Will Hunting. So we're talking serious PhD, super brainiac in math. But he's concerned about how we're teaching kids math. And so he wants to create a better system. Junior Undiscovered Math Prodigy. That's what JUMP stands for. And we're trying to get the system in Ontario to think about how we do that. But in Ontario, we don't really think the system is broken. In the US, they know their system is broken. And so the Gates Foundation just funded John to begin to introduce his system into the charter schools in the US to see if he can create this more numerate society. The results are pretty amazing. But as a social entrepreneur, so he sells books and he does all this other stuff to make money, his mission is much higher than that. It's really to transform how we educate kids.
So the next type of organization is the product organization. And the key characteristic there is obviously you're offering, whether it's a consumer product, so the beautiful products of Mr. Jobs and his lovely engineers at Apple, or a car, it could be pharmaceuticals, it could be a big piece of equipment that's sitting in a lab there, or device. I mean, generally these types of plays have really high development costs, but really high marketing, particularly if they're geared towards a consumer. So it's going to cost you X millions of dollars to come up with the iPad, but then you need to tell everybody just how great it is and that we all want one. You need to really think through what your sales and distribution model is. That is becoming easier with some of the new inventions. I mean, iTunes obviously has revolutionized how quickly we can get a software product in the hands of a consumer compared to the old days. You could have high production costs. You could have to think about whether you offshore the actual production of your product in order to bring it in at a price that is attractive to consumers. Do you outsource part of that? As a startup, oftentimes startups will. So they will come up with the base idea and then look to partner with an outsourced organization to help them build their product. So there's huge potential for scale. Oftentimes people will say, though, that commensurate, obviously, sometimes with the risk of whether a product will be accepted by consumers or not. And so in the bottom, I'll take this because I know your voice isn't so good. On the bottom corner there, I'm showing some new models we're starting to see, which is, we all realize, after the big collapse in 2008, that the dream of, overconsumption and having 10 television sets and homes and cars may be not what we all want to do. And so, consumers are much more open to share assets. And so there's some interesting asset sharing models, which interestingly, the car companies are investors in the likes of the auto shares and the Zip cars, which are looking to pool assets amongst groups of consumers who may not use them as frequently if they live in an urban setting. And Bixie's a very interesting one here around Toronto that lets you get around with shared bikes.
And the one thing I just wanted to say about that, if my voice holds out, thanks, Kerri, is that they pre-sold, right? So how many people are members of Bixie? Anybody? Just one? 2, so 3, 4, okay, great. So before they actually brought it to Toronto, they pre-sold memberships, which was a way for them to get some revenue so they could go out and buy the product. So we will talk about financing a little bit later, but that's an interesting one. And I was at an event the other day when someone held up their TTC card and then they held up their auto share card, and it's sort of a symbol now that you're a kind of cool person if you do these kind of things and you're thinking about the environment differently. So these are just a couple of other products. People know about Restore, Habitat for Humanity, right? It's really interesting. You can go to Home Depot, but you can also go to Restore and find out if there's the kind of door that you need when you're renovating your house, and all the proceeds go back to Habitat for Humanity. Me to We is the for-profit arm of Free the Children, which is the Kielburgers program. 50% of all the proceeds go right back into Free the Children. The Inspiration Studios is the beautiful bowl at the top right. And so this is out of Sisterine, which is an organization that helps homeless women. And the last one is Ella Botanicals, which is someone that uses organic products. And she's selling her products in retail outlets. So support all those people.
So now we're going to talk about, so we talked about organizations and the types of companies. So now we want to talk a little bit about what are the types of financing you could go out and find for these types of businesses that you're looking to start. So there's always number one, and we probably all start out that way, which is bootstrapping, self-funding, whether that's on our credit cards or whatever that might be. And you can reinvest all your profits for growth. And so I like to use the example of a family member of mine who actually has a successful online business called Toronto Corporate Stays, and her partner started with a very small amount of capital, and today they are running a $2 or $3 million online business. And so that is possible in some types of business. Lots of help and lots of sweat equity went into their business. There is debt. In some circumstances, you could borrow from someone. I show the handcuffs there largely because a lender is going to want to have security. So they're going to want to set the time when you need to pay it back. They're going to want to set up front what the interest rate to borrow the money is going to be. And they may use an asset, which may be something of your company's or yourself, that they're going to want for that loan. The other alternative you have is equity. So you can sell a piece of your venture to someone in exchange. So then they become your partner. And that's a picture there of the Walmart annual meeting, who obviously have many stockholders at this stage of their development.
The other thing I want to say is think about places like MEC, which is a cooperative, right? Mountain Equipment Co-op. And that's an interesting kind of model. I think this is still International Year of the Co-op. And it's Desjardins, right? A huge cooperative. And there's an interesting history of cooperatives in this country. So it's another model to think about worker co-ops or other ways. So just want to put that on your agenda as well. But ultimately, the lesson that we want to give you is to think about how you diversify your income, right? Not all your proverbial eggs in one basket, but think about different ways of doing that.
So I'm pinch hitting for Tony Redpath, who some of you might know from the program, and who was my partner for many years at a venture capital fund. And he's been a Mountain Co-op, Equipment Co-op member, I think, forever. And so, borrowing his line, I think, from this lecture in the past, he always is pretty excited when that dividend check comes or his member check comes, once a year. And, he gets his share of obviously what's being sold. And so it really can be a viable model that you, as a person who enjoys camping and doing those types of activities and buying those types of products, can participate in. So it's a model that might work for your business. So let's talk a little bit of a primer on debt versus equity. We're going to walk through an example in a second. But at the very base level, debt gets paid back first. So it sits ahead of everything in the food chain as far as financing goes, and it gets paid back first before there's any dividends or shareholder advances coming back. We talked about security. Most early stage lenders will not finance losses, and so they will be looking for security of some kind. If you don't have assets, hard assets in your business, then they're going to want you to guarantee with your personal assets. So that could be your home or your car or something like that, which may not be appealing to you depending on where you sit financially. But the good thing about it, and that's why there's a plus sign there, is once it gets paid back with the interest, of course, then the lender doesn't get anything else, any other piece of your business. The nice thing about equity is it never has to be repaid. So if you aren't successful, the equity person took the risk. It's all about risk and reward, but it does keep on paying forever. So as long as they own a piece of your company and you want to declare dividends or you ultimately sell your company, they are going to get their proportionate share of that based on the equity arrangement you stuck with them. So it's also could be seen as a plus or a minus. In the video we saw with Ray and with Duncan and Robin from Mantella, you saw a very healthy venture relationship between the entrepreneur and the team that helped him build his business and invested in his business. And so you have a partner in it, so they're there for the long haul, but if you don't necessarily do your homework, they may not be the partner you want for the long run, or they may have a different alignment around what they want to do with the business at some point during the future. So here's our example. So let's say that I'm going to write the Kerri mobile app, and I actually have a social mission associated with my app. I'm going to have it to do something to do with education in the school system. And so I've actually applied for a grant, and I've got a grant for $10K, but I now need $30,000 to build that app and get it into the marketplace as my startup capital. So in total, I need $40K. So let's look at the profit in 3 different scenarios. So whether I place low on the chart, whether I'm on, I make the featured list, or I absolutely hit it out of the park. I'm Angry Birds. I'm at the top of the chart, and I'm very, very profitable. And I'm talking profits, not revenues, because you always need to remember that you got your top line revenue, you've got your costs to continue to support the app, market it. iTunes takes its nice big piece of the pie, and so what I'm talking about here is the amount of money we've made after paying for all of those things. So in scenario 1, if I'm low on the chart and my profit's only 10K, then technically my lender loses 20K, because the 10K is going back to him or her of the profits in the debt scenario. Technically you get 0, but really that's why there's an asterisk beside the 20K. You owe them still 20K, and so you may be forced to sell an asset to get that back. If you'd gone into this as a 50-50 partner with equity, then the partner's going to lose 25K. You're going to get 5K because you get half the profits, and obviously the outcome is a little better for you as the entrepreneur. As it goes down the list, you can see the differences. And when I say the lender is even plus in my second scenario, it's because out of profit, I've paid them their interest on their money. So they will have received, whether it's 110% of their money back, or 120, depending on what your interest rate is, that will be that. But you won't make anything in that second scenario as well if you're in debt. And this is why oftentimes for early stage, high risk things, equity tends to be a preferable alternative, because there is more of a risk sharing, but that means you give more upside. So if you're at the top of the chart, if you'd gone it with the riskier for you as the entrepreneur debt scenario, you would have made 170K of that 200K. But obviously you're sharing it almost 50-50 in the equity scenario, where the partners now get 70. The last piece I put in there is clearly if you make it to the top of the chart, your granting agency reports your success. So that's one thing you need to be conscious of if you are applying for grants, is they have missions as well. And so, you will be asked from time to time to report on your progress against the mission. Also, the financial performance of the piece of software that was developed, or the product that was developed with their money. And so, they're really looking for those successes that they can put on their website so they can get their grant funds, topped up by others and continue to support the community. So just something to keep in mind.
So what are some of the sources of financing? Well, you got to be able to put your own skin in the game. If you're asking others to give you money, we tell the story here of a client that came in and he asked us to help him raise some money, and we said, so how much have you put in? He goes, I'm not putting my money into this thing. This is crazy. Okay, let's start somewhere else, right? So you got to be able to put your own skin in the game. And you've already heard us talk about family, friends, and fools quite a lot. I think we should all get the T-shirt and wear that around. Of course, are you going to talk about the turkey principle later?
I will.
Okay, great. And then there's traditional financing from banks, and then there's alternative financing places. There's actually something called the Canadian Alternative Investment Cooperative or Foundation now. That's all the faith-based communities. They contribute together, and they're prepared to fund not-profits through what we're calling social finance, which I'll talk about a bit later. And then there's crowdfunding. So if anybody watched the Obama debate last night, they might have remembered that he was so successful in his first campaign by raising lots and lots of small donations. That crowdfunding is absolutely huge. And so we're going to have a look at a video in terms of someone in Canada and what they're doing in that space.
I didn't found Small Change Fund, but it found me. I really felt like it was an idea that needed to happen, and I was there at the right time, the right place.
I had some time on my hands because I just had a baby. So I said, sure, let's do it.
This was an idea that was hatched about 3 years ago. I was at the time working at the Metcalf Foundation. I had met an amazing guy named Chet who runs Global Green Grants, which is an organization in the States that does microfunding to grassroots groups all across the world. I was very inspired by the Global Green Grants model because I felt that during my time with foundations, a lot of grassroots groups were slipping through the cracks. And yet that's really where a lot of important activity is happening and where a lot of important initiatives kind of come up. And I thought it'd be fantastic to have something like that in Canada.
My background has been working on the NGO side, delivering programming and managing small to medium-sized nonprofits. And so when Ruth said she had an idea to start a project that would help fund very small grassroots organizations, I was intrigued.
So we started looking at different ways we could do that and got really excited about the potential of online giving. So the idea behind Small Change Fund is that if we can source many, many small donations from individuals across Canada, we can make a huge impact at the community level. We source projects from a network of 25 advisors. Our advisors are from every community in Canada, basically. They help find those projects, they vet the projects. The best ones go up on our website, and then anybody can go on our website and find these projects and give to them.
These are groups who have fairly little capacity. They have a lot of dedication. The people leading these projects have a lot of passion and commitment.
And yet they find it really hard to find funding because they're often volunteer-led. They don't have the resources to write fancy proposals and to get it into foundations. So they're getting by on a wing and a prayer. We have had donors that have given $5. We've had kids that give their allowance or spend some of their birthday money. And we've had donors that give $5,000 because they want to complete a project. And the exciting thing about that is the projects are very specific, really tangible. And so when you give to something, you know exactly what you're giving to. You know who the person is, you know what it's going to support, and you know that you're going to hear from them again in terms of the impact that your donation had.
So we just wanted to thank everyone who helped us to put this project together last year. Small Change Fund and our funder, Lush, you really helped us to start building the youth climate movement.
What we like to see in a project is that they speak to global priorities in some way, but that they're addressing them at the local level. So the projects have to be compelling. It helps if there's some urgency to them, because I think the benefit of our model is we can get quick dollars into communities.
One of the things that differentiates Small Change Fund from other kinds of funding platforms is that not only do we feature projects on our website, we market those projects to donors. So we have an entire communications capacity within the organization, and we deliver marketing campaigns. Sometimes they're national, sometimes they're very targeted, to help those groups to market themselves to donors. One of the best things about working with Small Change Fund is learning about or hearing the stories of these people who are doing amazing work at the local level. One of our favorite stories is about Matt and Dave. Dave is the Fundy Baykeeper. He lives in St. Andrews, and he protects the Bay of Fundy.
They came to us, they said they needed $1,250 to buy a motor to go on their boat so that they could get further afield into little areas where they couldn't access before. So really simple, but it's changed their organization, it's changed their work, and they were ecstatic when they got the $1,250.
Dave is one of those heroes that you wouldn't normally hear about, but are super important to the fabric of our country, ensuring the health of our landscape and people.
The expertise I needed didn't come from my previous jobs. I really had to learn it on the job, especially the whole online social media side of things. But you know, we've been able to tap into some amazing partners that have helped us with that. Sigget Mars being one of them has really helped us with capacity and giving us advisors that can give us some really good information about how to do it. It's not the end of the story. We'll keep growing and developing, and meanwhile we're having a ton of fun, and we just keep getting charged and going on all that positive energy.
Great. So one of the things there is, many of you probably know Kiva, which is another interesting model. But think about this as a lesson for the kids in your lives as well, right? I mean, we all, as Kerri said, you know, lots of us have lots. And so how do we think differently about creating a sense of awareness in kids about others who don't, and allowing them to contribute birthday money or whatever it is as a real opportunity?
And obviously there's, you know, sites that are for more profit-oriented crowdfunding as well, like Kickstarter, that I'm sure some of you are familiar with. So from a sources of financing perspective, so we talked about those 3 F's again, those friends, family, and fools, and you might think the turkey is the turkey who gave you the money, but really the turkey principle is about, if you're going to take money from friends and family, you got to feel really comfortable that you're doing something with that money that makes a difference. Because you got to sit down and have turkey with them at least a couple of times a year, at Thanksgiving and Christmas, and you want them to be comfortable with what you're doing with their money, and also that they can afford to lose the money and that you've explained the risk properly to them. It's very, very important. We have angels who are high net worth individuals who generally like to invest in areas that they themselves have worked in or are comfortable with, or perhaps have a passion about. And so I've just given you a little link there. The slides will obviously be posted on the website, to the National Angel Capital Organization website that gives you some more information about angel investors. If you go to one of the lists, you'll find the various regional groups that will meet and consider investing as a group rather than individuals if you don't know people in those community. Let's talk a little bit about accelerator programs. I'll give you the plug for JOLT. And so JOLT is our program here at Mars that's part of the GAN, with the Global Accelerator Network, that was started by Techstars. The other one in Toronto that you might be familiar is offered through Extreme Startups. And so what it does is, rather than just offer space, it offers a really intense 4-month mentorship program. So you have a lead mentor and an EIR working with you. We have all kinds of great speakers who come in and then work one-on-one with the companies on various aspects. It's focused on online and mobile businesses that we believe can get through the JOLT period and come out the other end with a viable product with some user metrics, etc. Usually there's some investment associated with it as well, so we've raised a separate for-profit JOLT fund that provides those companies $30,000 in investment. So the first cohort is actually just about to graduate. They will have their demo day next week, and I am the lead mentor to a company called Sling Ride that I'm going to put a plug for here. They are looking for a co-founder person to join their team that has more the marketing expertise to market to consumers. So if any of you are not thinking yet about starting a company but might want to join one, come talk to me afterwards and I'd be happy to introduce you.
That's great, Kerri, thanks. See why you need a mentor at Mars? They never miss an opportunity.
They never do.
And so the final thing that I want to point out is something called the SVX. And when you're thinking about these social ventures, this is new language for people. We need to build the capacity. And what we're finding globally is there's this emergence of something called impact investors. These are people who want to invest for a social and financial return. So historically, we used to give not even historically, today we still give a donation, and philanthropy is still critical, but that's 100% gone. You get a tax receipt, but it's essentially 100% gone. And then you think about investing to make money. Well, you used to think about that, depending on the market. What about investing for a social and financial return? These folks are called impact investors, and there's a whole bunch of them emerging all over the world. Think, the Clintons and the Gates and all those high net worth individuals, but also think other people that aren't at that level. So Mars is in the process of launching something called the SVX. Used to stand for the Social Venture Exchange, but we're trying to get it through the Ontario Securities Commission. They're not comfortable with us using the word exchange, so SVX is what it is. But we've got great partners like the TMX, and we're really hoping to make this happen. So it'll be a platform where these social ventures can list, where the impact investors can come and look at them, and it'll be a matching platform for these kind of deals to be made. Because there is this emerging community of these impact investors, and they want good quality deals. So that's one of the really cool innovations we're trying to do here at Mars, and it's housed at something at Mars called the Center for Impact Investing. So we're really trying to move the needle pretty substantially in this field.
A couple of the other groups that are up there, so the banks and other institutions, a lot of the tier 1 banks like CIBC and Royal Bank, et cetera, really don't have the risk profile to back startups. But there are a couple of groups. So BDC obviously calls themselves the Entrepreneurs Bank and have some programs. And particularly, they fund a program at the Canadian Business Youth Foundation that may be worth you checking out. They just raised the age. So you used to be a youth if you were 30 or under, and they just raised that up to 39. obviously recognizing that many people get the itch to be an entrepreneur a little bit later in their career. And so some of those programs might be interesting to you. They have a little less, need to have guarantees and things like that, clearly people who are young and just starting out don't have. The venture capital funds, different funds very much invest at different stages in the growth of a company. And so you really need to do your homework and figure out, what their sweet spot is, what types of companies they specialize in. And you can do that. The CVCA's website is there for you, and it will break the investors into sort of those that like life sciences and healthcare, those that like information technology, those that like clean tech, et cetera. And they do try to give you an idea of whether they would do seed type funding or they only like to do growth and expansion. So that usually would mean you've got $5 or $10 million of revenue already. And so that's a resource you can use to investigate the types of investors that might be appropriate for you. There also are special, sources of financing. We live very much in a great country to be, someone doing research or trying to get something off the ground. And if you are looking for support in your proof of principle or, bringing your idea to life, there's just some logos up there that I, thought you should be aware of. So if it's a very engineering oriented program, then something like NSERC might be useful to you. The Canadian Media Fund obviously is looking at content and media plays. Corral CEA is looking at projects in certain areas that they'll fund. And we have a program that we help administer here at Mars called Venture Start that is open to entrepreneurs that are from the STEM community. So STEM is science, technology, engineering, or math degrees. And there's some education that goes along with it. And they also could potentially provide a $30,000 grant to help you get your business off the ground. IRAP do grants on a regular basis to organizations. They can be small ones to early companies or larger ones later.
What does IRAP stand for, Kerri?
It's a good question.
Industrial Research.
Assistance program?
Thank you, Kerri.
And actually, we're going to announce Venture Start next week, or 2 weeks, in 2 weeks, because your attendance here plus one workshop series qualifies for the education portion of Venture Start. So it's a bit of a long explanation, so we'll save it for then, but it's coming in 2 weeks.
Great. The other thing on the not-for-profit side is foundations. We have a pretty robust foundation community in this country. The Ontario Trillium Foundation, for example, originally used lottery funds. So there's like $120 million in grants that they gave out annually. It's incredibly substantial. And once I've sort of mentioned this to you, you'll see them in every little hockey arena. They'll plaque that says the Ontario Trillium Foundation all throughout the province. But they're an amazing resource for us. Gates, I mentioned earlier, that just helped out the JUMP organization, and they're really doing amazing things, particularly in developing countries. And then Imagine Canada is a resource where they have actually a directory of foundations where you can search, if your venture is in the education field or childcare or whatever it is, and you'll be able to find a foundation using that resource.
You'll also find on the Entrepreneur's Toolkit or on the Mars website that there is also a database of funding sources, so beyond what you would find here in our slide deck.
And I think we've left some time for questions. We've also put up our email address and our Twitter handle, and we all expect several hundred more followers by the end of this evening. But if you have any questions, we are very happy to take them. Thank you, Kerri.
Thanks.
Thank you guys very much, Kerri and Allyson. I have a couple questions from the webcast. The first one, it comes from Joseph, and he asks, are co-ops for-profit entities?
Co-ops are both nonprofit and for-profit. They cross the boundary, so you can choose to incorporate as a not-for-profit co-op or a for-profit one.
Okay. And another question, what are the legal restrictions on getting equity-based crowdfunding?
So there are legal restrictions. So right now in Canada, you cannot get equity-based crowdfunding. In the US, likely come January, you will be able to, but it will be restricted to businesses that are operating out of the US. I will say that I can't say much, but Kerri in the intro said that I'm working on an Ontario Securities Commission subcommittee right now that is looking at whether or not some of the things we are seeing south of the border could come northward, but can't make any promises. I am an advocate, so I'm doing my best.
Yeah. And we'll maybe do one last question. Could you guys, or ladies, please explain further what a B Corp is?
Sure. So it's like a benefit corporation. And in fact, in the US, there is a legal structure called benefit corporation. In Canada, a B Corp is like a set of ISO standards that you go through a checklist and you complete it, and it really shows that you consider more than just shareholder interest. You're actually considering stakeholder interest.
So you actually make a change in your articles of incorporation if you're a for-profit company, and there's some wording that you can find on the Mars website that we worked on with the B Corp folks in the US to be able to do that within our legal structure. Our actual legal structure in Canada is much more open to that structure, so it's a very minor thing where you're just embedding the social mission in, you know, one or two lines into your articles of incorporation.
Yeah, so it's like a global brand. And so people who were trying to invest in organizing these social ventures, actually, if you've completed a B Corporation, I think we've got 49 B Corps in Canada now. So it's a growing movement.
So what we'll try to do is we'll post some information about B Corps in the LinkedIn group. I saw a question there. Can you go to the mic? Just a little bit over, just so the webcasters can hear you.
Recently looked at the B Corp website. I'm just curious, is it meant for startups? Because my understanding was it was actually a running business.
The company I talked about earlier, yes. They went through it. They were the first Canadian B Corp that was certified, and yeah, they certainly, it does open you up, as Allyson said earlier, to potentially talking to impact investors, certainly south of the border where it's a little more known and branded as a way that you are. The interesting thing, we live in Canada, so a lot of the things around the way we treat employees are kind of embedded into our culture and are easier to get higher scores on than probably some of our US counterparts.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so if you go through and, you check what are your, your employee standards. Well, of course, if you give things like, maternity leave, which is required by law, you score higher. So Canadian B Corps are actually at a real advantage to score high.
A question from the webcast. In a consulting environment, is one protected through incorporating your business, or does one still need liability insurance?
One still needs liability insurance for the corporation, but obviously your personal assets would be not at risk in that model.
And I see a question over here, but I'm going to do one more webcasting question, and then we'll take yours as the last one. Is listing stock on the TSX Venture Exchange available for smaller ventures?
The TSX venture? So maybe they mean the SVX? Is that what they mean?
No, I think they mean the TSX one. So there are obviously earlier stage companies that do list. I would say they are generally not just fresh startups, because it is expensive to maintain obviously your listing on the TSX, even in the exempt market.
Yeah, and then for the SVX, it's not launched yet, but working with the TMX, we are hoping that it'll eventually be a feeder system for that, but we're hoping to launch once we get OSC approval.
And question over here.
Thank you. My name is Jason Bernstein, and I'm in the CFA program. I'm interested in working in early stage companies on the finance side, like venture funds, something like that. I'm not exactly sure yet, but what I was wondering is, you talked a bit about impact investing, and I know that right now it's a very, very small part of the capital markets, and I'm wondering what the sort of medium-term and long-term outlook is on that sector of investing.
So JP Morgan just issued a report on impact investing. So all the big guys are playing in this space right now, and they see it happening. And we're projecting it to be pretty substantial. We are working with your industry and quite a lot of other folks. In 2010, Mars released a report of the Canadian Task Force on Social Finance, which our chair, Ilse Tronek, was the lead on. But we had people like Paul Martin on there, and the head of MasterCard Foundation, head of Vancity, people like Sam Dubach, others who really made a huge contribution to mobilizing the impact investing network in Canada, and we've been reporting on the progress ever since then. We think it's actually going to take off. The latest report is from Monitor, and they've done some scoping about what the size of the market is. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but the Monitor report will give you that. It's a great report.
Thank you very much.
And you just go to socialfinance.ca and you can find all the information and all the links. Socialfinance.ca.
We'll post socialfinance.ca also in the LinkedIn group to sort of, and as well, we're having a best practices in the new year on BCorp. So if people want to learn more, then we'll be doing a whole session on it. So I just wanted to thank Kerri and Allyson for your great presentation, and thanks everyone for coming out.